Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode on our Lessons from the Game podcast. I'm joined today with my co host, Ben Pegna, and this is our short form episode. And we'll be talking about the impact and benefits of multi sports on our future rugby players. Ben, how's it going, man? It's been a while.
Yeah, Jim. Well, what about you? How's things there?
No, great, man. Sun is shining. And the French are in France, when the sun is out, everybody's in a better mood and everybody's happy, smiling, more productive. So all good, man. Ben, let's get straight to the chase. We spoke earlier on the phone about this topic, multi-sports, and at this stage, I said, Ben, why are we talking about multi-sports for younger players? We want to inspire the future rugby players, the young rugby players, but you actually hit it on the spot. That's the root of our success, what we do when we are younger, the way we are moving, the way we are working. But tell me, what was the inspiration for today's pod?
Yeah, we've spoken about it a bit, haven't we? Last week we alluded to early specialization, and we were talking about how to get into an academy and how to be scouted. And it came up as a bit of a topic, so I thought it'd be really good to dive deeper into it. But at the same time, we're receiving lots of positive feedback, and some of the feedback we're getting is from parents who've got kids who are going through this at the moment. They're at school, they're playing lots of sports, and they're getting some pressure on them to just specialize. And some feedback that I received, someone reached out to me and asked me, should my son stop playing football and only play rugby at the moment? And he's getting a bit of pressure from the coaches to choose one or the other. And I thought it'd be great for us to delve into it a bit, talk about the benefits of early specialization or not specializing too early, and talk through all the detail around it so people are well informed, so that they have some actual details and some information to make some good informed decisions from.
Yeah, Ben, what really touched me was when we spoke. I was in the car earlier before we got on this pod, and you were talking about the dad listening to the podcast with his son. It's kind of like become their little routine after training or on their way to training. And to be honest with you, when we started this pod, we said from the start, we're not sure where this is going. We're going to adapt, we're going to evolve, and seeing that parents are now listening to this pod with their children is unbelievable. And that's why, we decided to, or you actually decided, needed to give you the credit for this topic today. It's great because I think it's very important. You talk about specializing early is the right choice, not the right choice. I think that's a discussion. We both will have potentially different point of views, but I can definitely tell you this, Ben, from personal experience, playing different sports or participating in different sport had loads of benefits for me as a rugby player. If I have to go back to one of my earliest failure as a karate athlete, yellow belt, I prepared for the South African Championships at the age of 12, and I was smashing it. And because I was bigger than everyone else in my age category. And when I got to the South African Championship and we weren't aware with it, you had to fight in a weight category. Yeah, I was basically stuffed because I ended up fighting against black belts and bim bam boom. There I was gone, running away in tears.
Hey,
I
you've
didn't
kept that
even
story quiet.
I didn't even complete.
Yeah.
And honestly, I haven't thought of that story for years. And actually, that just came out when you started talking about the multi sports. But yeah, that was one of my first sporting failures.
Mate, you kept that away in the locker. Jeepers.
Oh,
Yeah. Awesome. But it's good experience. You go through those experiences, and I guess that's part of that journey. You ultimately became a rugby player. Maybe rugby chose you, you know? Um, but because of your build and you loved the game and you were passionate and the doors opened. But all those experiences along the way, whether it be swimming, whether it be karate, whether it be jiu-jitsu, whether it be football, we grew up doing loads of things, running around with our mates, and then sometimes we develop skills that actually serve us really well later on, or they teach us. Actually, that was quite isolating. Being in a sport by myself, that was quite lonely. I prefer a team sport, and you end up maybe directing your energy towards being in a team and playing your role within that game. And yeah, it's interesting how it works, isn't it?
that's great. I think it was my first failures. But what it did teach me was that, you just shouldn't give up. And from that experience, I made a promise to myself that day at the age of 12, when I ever get an opportunity again, and even if I fail, whether it's in a different sport, I'll just stay in the fight. And that's what I eventually did. I remember my first, I almost said test match, but my first cricket match for the under 13 first team of Paul Boys Primary. I was a fast bowler, but obviously when you're bowling in the nets, it's easy. It's flat. And then I got onto a pitch with a bit of bumps, and yeah, I opened up my first over with six wides, and then I kindly requested from the coach that I not bowl again, but I gave it my all for the rest of the game, and that's when I realized we all got different skills and different strengths. But Ben, you got a bit more of a S&C background than me. And I think the importance of multi-sports or playing different sports at a young age and how it can be beneficial for rugby players or our future rugby stars is the athletic development. Would you like to share a bit more about that?
Yeah, I think, we've alluded to it a bit in the past, but if anything that creates that well-rounded person that helps develop your motor skills, your coordination, your balance, a bit of resistance, how do you deal with certain situations? Um, what are you like? Are you good in different planes of movement? What's your coordination like? All those types of things get developed by doing many, many different things. And yeah, it's brilliant. You see in most cases, I think most of the successful rugby players we've seen have not specialized early. They've done lots and lots of different sports. They've played cricket in the cricket season, as you just mentioned. They've played football, a lot of soccer. They've done hockey. They've done a lot of swimming. They've developed lung capacity. And lots of other attributes from a mental point of view. I think of swimming, which I did mostly in primary school. It's pretty lonely. It's pretty isolating, but you have to really dig in deep because, if you don't put the hard work in. So that taught me some other mental things and psychological lessons that have stood me in good stead on a rugby journey as well. So there's loads from a physical and a mental point of view that help us develop, I think.
Yeah, I gave swimming a go. It wasn't that great, but that's another story. Ben, I used to do athletics. No, I was not a sprinter or hurdler. I used to do shot put. I used to do discus, hammer throw. I almost killed someone once at the South African Championships at high school with a hammer throw because I threw it way over the net. It bounced onto the tarmac, onto the track, and I saw this kid just look up, and the ball just bounced in front of her, and it just hopped over her head. So that was a close call. But I was thinking, and it was funny. I was driving back here on my way to my apartment, and while I was thinking about what we're going to talk about, it took me back to the days when I was working on my shot put skills. Now, shot put, how boring is that? you know, Working on a skill just to see how far you can actually push an iron ball. But I was relentless. I was committed, and going to athletics meet, you get, like I say, I'm not sure if I'm correct now, but you get maybe 3 opportunities to qualify, and you go through and you do all that training, weeks and months of training just for that one opportunity. You're stressed out. I remember back in the day, I don't know if my favorite part of the athletics meeting was actually competing or all the snacks my mom packed in for me and getting pocket money and going to the tuck shop. But what it did teach me was that moment. I remember when you step up to that line in that shot put ring, you got to go. The guy before you, he just went, let's say, 12 meters, and you got to beat him to qualify. You got to go the extra centimeter or extra 2 centimeters just to make sure you're safe. And I remember that feeling I used to have in my stomach. I was like, can I do this? And that head talk, we talk about that head talk, that voice in your head saying, can you do this? That self doubt. And that wouldn't have happened for me because when you're in a team environment, for example, sometimes your teammates will cover up for certain weaknesses or they will kind of like camouflage all those weaknesses. But when you're also doing an individual sport, it's you versus you. And what that taught me doing shot put was discipline, was work ethic, just working at one skill, one skill, but it was completely different. But I was fully committed, and that filtered through later into my rugby career at high school. So there's so many benefits for, especially for the parents listening and to the youngsters listening that is playing rugby at high school at the moment or that are still trying to figure out what they want to do.
Yeah, there are loads, and I think it's also it's the lessons that you might fail. It's teaching you to maybe fail and come back. It's teaching you how to deal with winning and failing. and getting better and picking yourself up and dusting yourself down and going again. It's teaching you, perhaps, actually, I much prefer being in a team environment than an individual sport. And actually, I'm better suited to playing that team sport. And maybe that's a part of the lesson. It's it's helping you learn a different role in a different environment. Maybe in football, I'm not as good at football, so I serve a different purpose. Serve this type of role. Benefiting from that experience, being coachable in a different environment is another skill that you develop. Learning how to be an encourager or a good teammate in another environment might be another attribute that you develop. Building the confidence, as you spoke about, you suddenly, when you were talking about that, stepping up to the line, I suddenly had, I was having flashbacks as a primary school kid stepping onto the start line in the swimming races, swimming galas, and just that nervous bit when you're standing but you're by yourself. It's pretty isolating, and it feels like everybody's staring at you. And then when you dive in the water and you just head down and you're going for it, and you can just hear this big noise of everybody, the cheering and the noise bouncing around, dealing with that emotional high and maybe the low as well, and so they all stand you as part of that journey in good stead. I think it's important with rugby that we talk about, with other sports like gymnastics perhaps and swimming, they're early specialization sports. And football, because of the technical aspect, is becoming more early specialization. But we're lucky in rugby in many ways because it is a later specializer or a late maturation sport where people develop a bit later. They have to fill out, they have to develop fully, that we actually get an opportunity to keep them playing lots of other sports whilst they continue to develop an all-round skill set and an all-round physique and other athletic abilities that then can serve them really well in rugby ultimately, if that's what they choose to pursue.
Yeah, I think it's very important. If I have to look back on my rugby career and everything that happened before that, I only started playing rugby at the age of 13. And I think I have told this story on the podcast before. Yeah, I met our first team coach back in the day for the first time, first day at school, and he just asked me, "Do you play rugby?" I said, "No, I play football." And he says, "No, well, you'll be playing rugby from today onwards." And I never really played the game. I played it for fun with my mates, but never understood the rules. But the athletic benefits, all the different skill set you're developing, you all the cognitive skills, your body is moving in different planes of motion. All right. I'm not even saying that correct. Different planes
Hey,
of
it works. Yeah,
movement.
I know what you mean.
All
It's
right.
it's a
But you
great
know what
point.
I
Yeah,
mean? All right.
yeah.
And I think that's important. It's about, we see a lot of players that lack coordination when they start to play rugby. They don't have great core strength. It's a lot of weaknesses, poor mobility. So there's definitely a massive benefit for trying out different sports, because not only you're developing your body, and especially today, if we look at society, the way things, players on their phones the whole time, kids on their phones the whole time, it's good to be active. And also, like that, you discover what you like and what you don't like, what environment, a football environment is the rugby environment, same with cricket, individual sports. That's where where you're really good at something. For example, my youngest daughter, she started doing cheerleading last year. And I was like, cheerleading? Why? That's not a sport. You're just shouting and doing cheers and jumping around, doing flapjacks. But actually, it's quite intense. The amount of preparation she puts, it's taught a discipline. She's training every single day. We actually had to buy this blow up mat where she can practice stances and her jumps. And I actually saw the other day in Toulouse, she went to this trampoline park. She was doing all these flips and crazy stuff at 11 years old. I'm like, what the heck? Last year, summer, actually in July, so less than a year ago, she could hardly do some of the flips. I had to try and help her. I went on YouTube and looking at videos, and imagine me, a prop, trying to
Job, man. Yeah,
a
job.
daughter with the cheerleading skills. But just to see her confidence and how she has progressed, that's so important. But I think if I just have to move on a little bit, is the tactical side of things. The situational IQ, finding yourself in different situations and actually working on your decision making.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's a really important one. And so you develop around your abilities and your capabilities and your action capabilities. And just something we've spoken about before, skill acquisition theory. when you're limited with some of your physical attributes, you have to develop certain other attributes to be able to allow you to survive. So, in that environment, so for example, I developed the 360 vision, perhaps, so that I know where I'm going to pass the ball before I receive the ball in football, because perhaps I'm not very good at dribbling the ball, or so I've developed the ability to know before I've received the ball, I'm going to pass the ball there, there, or there, and I'm going to take it with my left foot, but pass it with my right foot there. Now, when you develop those sort of attributes in football, that's transferable to rugby. That's the exact same thing. When if I get kicked the ball here or I receive the ball here, I know that perhaps I can't run through everybody, but the options for me are that I can pass it this way, or I could kick it through there, or I could actually do something different. I could look for support in this way, and you develop other skills that you've developed, and the capabilities have developed based on what your limitations were. So that's really, really important as well, and it's really positive. I'm really glad you mentioned confidence as well earlier,
Yeah.
because that's transferable into all these things, isn't it?
I think it's important. And I think the other side as well is the social side of things. And from my personal experience, all the mates and friends that I made from the athletic side of things, whether they were hurdler or high jumper, as we would go into the winter sports, we remained friends. And what happened, they would support me playing rugby. Some of them would be playing hockey. It could support them. It was great. So just from a social aspect, also gives you that sense of belonging as well. And also trying to find yourself, finding your identity, because you might do a certain sport, but it's maybe not really your crowd, but everybody is unique. And it's just about trying to figure out. But I know a lot of parents, I get this question a lot. A lot of parents are like, what should I do? I think my son should just be focusing on football, like you just mentioned earlier. My dad was a footballer. I come from actually from a football family. Can you believe it? So obviously, due to political reasons back in the day, my dad never really played at the highest level, but he was a very talented footballer from what I've heard. And he never ever put pressure on me to play football. Never ever. He just said, all I want you to do is to go out there and enjoy yourself. But at some stage, you need to choose a sport. But he allowed me to do karate. I did my athletics. I did my cricket. I even a stage dabbled a bit in basketball. When I knew that rugby is my thing, so he asked me this. He asked me this at the age, is this your thing? I'm like, yes, it is. And he asked me, do you want to go pro? I said, yes, I do. I said, right, now let's get to work. And I think that's important for
What age were you
parents.
then, G?
I was 16 back
Yeah,
then.
see, that's a good age, isn't it? Because, like
Yeah.
you've described, you've done karate, you've done cricket, you've done all these different things. Some kids would have done wrestling as well, or, my youngest son does jujitsu. I'm really happy for him. And when we interviewed Omar, and when he came on, he was talking about the benefit of those combat sports. But it's really interesting hearing your story. So then he said to you, at the age of 16, what, like, if you love this, then go for it now. You're all in for it now.
Yeah, I think that was the most important thing. He said you got to be committed. He said you can't constantly change. I think there's a difference between discovering different sports and committing to one sport, and constantly changing. I think it's very for our parents that are listening. You need to allow a period of discovery, but then you need to guide your child and say, okay, now, you've tried all these different sports. What do you really enjoy? Ask the right questions. What do you really enjoy? What are you passionate about? Do you really want to go above and beyond? Do you want to go to the extra level? Do you feel good when you progress? I think that's very important because at the end of the day, my dad never forced, and this is where a lot of parents make them because we do, especially when it comes to dads that wanted to play at the highest rugby level and they never could, and they're trying to live vicariously through their children. And we see parents screaming at their children. And this is the one thing, if I can say this to parents, if you see a dad shouting at the 11-year-old kid and breaking him down, you stuffing up, I'll authorize you. I'll write you that note. All right. But that's very important. We got to be mindful. We already live in a society where young rugby players or young athletes, they struggle mentally. And I think it's very important that we as parents and adults and mentors and people in a position of power create an environment where young athletes or future rugby players can discover all the different skills, discover all these different situations of pressure, but in a safe environment.
Mate, brilliantly said. I love that. And it's I like that when you're in, you're all in. For me, it was a very similar thing. I was playing all these different sports, but then the rugby just took over. And I think you choose. In my situation, I choose. Which ones do I enjoy the most? Which ones am I probably going to progress the most in? And if I progress the most, I actually enjoy the competitive element of it. And the rugby, I kept on getting selected for some teams, and I realised when I started playing against some more people at football, and I got a bit more exposed, that I was pretty average. And so I could do a job to a level, but then I realised actually this is my ceiling, and then the other stuff sort of took over organically. And I think that also happens. So I guess we're saying that if you can stay in as many sports as possible for as long as possible until it becomes obvious for you because of either competition or enjoyment where you want to be socially. Maybe you go to university and you want to meet some friends and you play social hockey or something like that because that's what you want to do, or you want to carry on with the rugby and you want to try and progress. Then that decision almost gets made for yourself, depending on what you want to achieve, I suppose, or get out of it.
Yeah, I think, Ben, if I can maybe summarize it for our audience, especially to the parents that are listening, I think each great rugby player has got a great origin story. You know, if you look at Cheston Colby, it was athletics, and mine was not cricket. But I think
I
when
was
it
about
comes
to say yours was shot put,
I was
stroke
shocked, by the
cricket.
way. Funny story. I never told you this. When I broke the Western Province record, I think I was 14, if I'm not mistaken. And I'll never forget it. Everything was perfect. And as I launched that iron ball in it was in the perfect straight line, perfect trajectory. And I broke the Western Province record. It stood for a few years though. So that was an awesome moment. But I think what multi-sports bring to our future rugby players, yes, it's the classic stuff of discipline, work ethic. You're learning to acquire new skills. It's developing the mental edge, helping you to develop your mental armor. That's another topic, but I want us to talk about at some stage, Ben. But like you mentioned, your athletic ability, your cardiovascular ability, all the elements and the ingredients that you need to become a good or great rugby player starts with discovering your body, discovering different sports, different ranges of motion, different planes of movement. And only then can you only start your journey to becoming a great or good rugby player. I think that's very important for our parents and our audience to know.
Okay. I think it's really helpful. I hope it's helpful for parents listening. Give us feedback, please. Yeah, let us know any other questions around this. We'd love to talk about it. We'd love to address some of the concerns and issues that parents have. We know that there are a lot of listening. We've had feedback directly. We can see as well from the numbers of the people that the demographics. And we know there's a need out there because sometimes it's not the clearest information, and there's more pressure on kids now to choose from an earlier age with specialization, especially in the UK with football, where they're told, look, if you want to be a good footballer, and they've got this carrot in front of them, you need to stop doing other things. And I think it's important that parents feel like they're equipped and they're not necessarily ruining their kids' dreams, if you like, in inverted commas. So yeah, it's an important topic, and I'm glad we've spoken about it today.
Yeah, it's great, Ben. I think firstly, what we need to do is you mentioned that, just say thank you for everybody giving us feedback. Is really important. The more feedback you give us, that helps us to really frame our topics and our discussions, especially on the short form. The short form episodes is an opportunity for us to deep dive in specific topics that really interest you. And we will not know what to talk about or how to help you if you don't give us that feedback. So, and how can you give us that feedback? It's simple. If you are watching or listening on Spotify or YouTube, you have the ability to leave a comment. Leave a comment, leave your thoughts, ask us a question, give us feedback. You can DM us on our social media platforms. But just reach out and let us know what you think. If you think it was great, if you think it was bad, we don't care. No, we actually do care. We want the information. So we want feedback. We want to evolve as podcast hosts, but most importantly, as human beings. And Ben, I can tell you this from this podcast journey, it has helped me. I'm starting to read more. I'm doing more research and, looking at things differently. And when times are tough, I realize sometimes it's a good thing, because then you really discover who you are. And just listening to the podcast episode with Jacko, where the worst thing in his life actually became one of the best things in his life. But
That's
Ben,
good.
that's me. I think we need to have a hard stop. Anything else to add before we sign off?
No, it's good, bro. Yeah, it's good, G. Yeah.
All
Well
right,
done,
guys,
mate.
and remember, like and subscribe to all our different channels on all the various platforms. Have an
Cheers,
awesome
guys.
day and take care of yourself.